Have you ever thought about why certain women choose to live on their own? No boyfriend, no partner, not even appearing as if they are searching for one. The answer isn't loneliness, a lack of choices, or heartbreak. It comes from something deeper, more uncomfortable, more unsettling, something that breaks apart everything we were taught about a woman's role. Because when a woman decides to stay alone, she isn't getting lost. She is discovering herself. And that kind of self-discovery doesn't come with applause, likes, or company. It arrives through silence, inner strength, and a kind of freedom most people still fail to understand. No, she isn't lonely. She is selective. She isn't cold. She is simply tired of burning for people who never cared to feel her warmth. There is something deeply unsettling about a woman who doesn't need a relationship to feel complete, because it shatters the logic of control, breaks the illusion of emotional dependence, and exposes a harsh truth. Most men don't know how to respond to a woman who doesn't need saving. And most women are still learning to recognize themselves in that quiet yet overwhelming mirror of power. Carl Jung once said that everything we refuse to acknowledge in ourselves becomes part of our shadow. And many of these women who remain single are actually reflections of that collective shadow. They are what many people secretly want to become, but very few have the courage to live as. They don't cry out for love. They express their choices quietly. They don't present themselves for attention. They step back to protect their peace. They are less interested in fairy tale princes and more invested in their own inner calm. And that unsettles people, because while society pushes urgency to be with someone, these women have learned the power of simply being with themselves. The woman who lives alone without a boyfriend isn't lost. She is functioning on another frequency, a level where nothing is begged for, everything is chosen, where validation isn't required and presence alone is enough. And maybe that is why she faces so much criticism, so much judgment, so many labels thrown at her. But what most people fail to see is that behind her absence lies a presence so strong it fills space, that rises above, that challenges emotional norms. She doesn't want just any love. She wants a love that doesn't reduce her. And until that comes along, she remains steady, whole, and complete. Maybe you don't fully understand it right now. Maybe it feels like exaggeration, ego, or emotional defense. But deep inside, very deep inside, there is a question living within you, a quiet one that continues to pulse even when ignored. What if this silent path is actually the only path that leads to the most important kind of love, the one that begins with the self? The silence around a woman who lives alone is not emptiness. It is a sanctuary. And those who cannot recognize the value of that space often label her as cold, distant, or arrogant. But what many fail to realize is that she didn't build those walls to shut the world out. She built them so she would not lose herself. Carl Jung also said that everything we do not confront within ourselves, we project onto others. And perhaps that is why so many people mistake solitude for emptiness, when in reality it can become the richest ground for self-discovery. While most people seek fulfillment through external bonds, she turned inward. And there, within the vast space of her own inner world, she faced the parts of herself she had avoided for years. Childhood wounds, silent abandonments, attachments disguised as love. Her choice to be alone did not come from an open wound, but from a scar that finally closed. She didn't stop believing in love. She simply stopped accepting what was labeled love when it made her feel smaller. She has known chaos. She has loved until she lost herself. She has given more than she received. She has begged for fragments that should never have been enough. But one day she woke up, and that awakening wasn't instant. It came through repeated disappointments that stopped hurting and started teaching. What appears as coldness is emotional maturity. And maturity is intimidating because it requires truth, depth, and awareness. She doesn't want just any companionship. She wants reciprocity. She is no longer moved by promises, but by real presence. And maybe that is why she feels unreachable to many. Because she doesn't want to be rescued. She wants to be truly seen. And that requires more than charm or words. It requires the courage to go into emotional depths most people avoid. And that is exactly where many step back. Not because she is difficult, but because she is whole. And when a woman becomes whole, she triggers two extremes in people: admiration and fear. Admiration from those who are also searching for wholeness. Fear from those still living in fragments, hoping someone else will complete them. She doesn't aim to complete anyone. She wants to flow alongside someone who has also found themselves. Until then, she remains alone, not out of misfortune, but out of loyalty to her own soul. She isn't hiding, she is preserving herself. There is a clear difference between isolation and preservation, yet society rarely understands a woman like this. A society that still promotes the idea of happily ever after, only existing in pairs. A society that doubts anyone without a partner, as if it signals failure. Carl Jung once said that where conformity dominates, authenticity has little space. And she does not live by conformity. She lives by essence. She hears statements like, "You are too picky," or "No one is perfect, be more open," and she simply smiles. A calm, steady, almost knowing smile, because she understands that what people call picky is often just standards finally learned through experience. She is not searching for perfection. She is searching for someone emotionally mature enough to love without causing harm. Someone who has done the inner work she has already faced. And truthfully, that is not something easily found everywhere. The discomfort she creates is not in what she says, but in what she represents. She stands as living proof that happiness does not require dependence on anyone. And that truth removes masks. Men who rely on female insecurity feel challenged. Women still trapped in the need for validation feel exposed. But she is not here to oppose anyone. She is simply existing. And the authenticity of someone who has freed herself becomes a harsh mirror for those still confined. She is not in a rush. She does not force timing to satisfy others. She honors her own rhythm, and that alone creates silent resistance in a world obsessed with speed. She values depth while the world chases distraction. She seeks presence while the world offers surface-level availability. She desires soul-deep connection while others focus on appearances for social media. And when she says no, it is not manipulation, it is truth. When she walks away, it is not drama, it is self-protection. When she chooses solitude over empty company, it is not pride, it is clarity. And that clarity, shaped through experience and emotional surrender, is her quiet revolution. Because she does not live to please, she lives to exist. And that simple state of being is exactly what makes her so unsettling to a system built on dependency. Perhaps what disturbs people most about this woman is not her solitude, but the calm she has discovered within herself. Carl Jung taught that those who look outward dream, but those who look inward awaken. And it was exactly that inward path she chose to walk. It was never simple. It was a demanding process of removing every mask she had worn, confronting the ghosts of emotional dependency, and slowly rebuilding herself layer by layer. She no longer defines herself through the gaze of others. She sees herself through her own awareness, and that changes everything. How often have you questioned whether being alone means failure or freedom? How many times have you felt the pressure to explain why you are not with someone? This woman has lived those same questions. She once believed there was something wrong with her for being alone in a world that glorifies couples, even the ones that are unhappy. But eventually she realized something simple yet powerful. It is better to be alone than to feel invisible inside a relationship. From that realization, she made a quiet promise to herself. Never again would she accept less than what she knows she deserves. Her journey is not straight or easy. There are days filled with doubt, moments where memory pulls her backward, nights where silence feels heavy. Yet alongside all of that, there is a strength that grows with every conscious choice she makes. She learned that real love does not confine, does not consume, and does not manipulate. The love she now desires is one that frees, that adds to her life, that supports without suffocating it. And until such a love arrives, she continues to grow alone, not out of pride, but out of self-respect and inner integrity. This woman reflects Jung's idea of individuation. She has broken apart, faced her shadow, descended into the unconscious layers of her own pain, and returned more complete than before. And now that she recognizes herself fully, She refuses to become half of anything again. She does not seek someone to complete her. She seeks someone to meet her in awareness. That kind of clarity can feel intimidating because it requires emotional responsibility. And the truth is, not everyone is ready for that kind of love. Many still love from emptiness, from fear, from possession, from lack. If she walks alone today, it is not because she is lost, but because every step she takes carries awareness. Every no she gives is an act of self-respect. Every absence is a reminder that love should never require begging. She no longer feels the need to prove anything. That quiet certainty, born deep within her, changes everything around her. Because a woman who has found herself again becomes difficult to mislead, not because she is guarded, but because she is clear. The woman who lives alone is not the same woman who once pleaded to be loved. Something within her broke open, and it was that breaking that set her free. Sometimes only through collapse does a new self emerge. Carl Jung once said that a tree reaching toward heaven must also have roots that descend into hell, and she has lived that truth. She has gone into the depths of her own story, faced inherited fears, ancestral wounds, and emotional patterns that were never fully hers alone. She has broken cycles. She has refused relationships that repeated the same painful script. She has learned that it is not her responsibility to fix others, to rescue them, or to accept emotional scraps out of fear of loneliness. When she stopped accepting less, the world did not immediately understand her. It tried to label her, to question her, to make her doubt herself. But she held her ground, first with hesitation, then with growing awareness, and finally with a quiet form of emotional strength that cannot be shaken easily. She learned to comfort herself in silence, to find warmth in her own presence. She is not distant or unreachable. She is simply no longer open to being emotionally invaded. There is a difference between loving openly and allowing oneself to be diminished. She knows that difference now. She opens her heart, but only where truth is present, not where performance or empty words replace sincerity. Her intuition has become refined. Her energy now acts like a filter. She can sense what lacks depth long before it approaches her closely. And she does not hesitate to walk away. Her transformation is not superficial. It is deep, archetypal, as if something ancient has awakened within her. A memory that she was never meant to live small, never meant to shrink herself to be accepted. And in remembering that, something within her shifted. A more instinctive, sovereign part of her awakened, intuitive, self-aware, emotionally independent. She may be alone, but she is not lost. She is aligned with something larger within herself. And no matter how others try to define her, cold, difficult, distant, none of it stays. Because she no longer lives to fit into definitions. She lives to expand beyond them. She no longer chases attention. She embodies presence. She is no longer waiting to be chosen. She chooses. And this reversal confuses those who are still attached to control, to old ideas of relationships and power. But she has already crossed that threshold. On the other side, she discovered something essential. The real relationship begins only when you no longer abandon yourself to have one. There is something quiet and sacred in the way she moves through life. She does not rely on applause or external validation. Her confidence is not loud. It is still, grounded, and steady. And within that stillness lies her real strength. Carl Jung said that what we do not face within ourselves eventually shapes our destiny. And perhaps that is why she, through repeatedly choosing herself, has shaped a life that others may not fully understand, yet quietly recognize as powerful. She no longer tries to fill emotional gaps with promises or convince anyone of her worth. She does not ask for a place in anyone's life because she understands that presence cannot be demanded. It must be willingly given. And when it is not rooted in truth, she simply steps away. She does not respond with anger or bitterness. She leaves with a quiet dignity, as someone who has been lost enough times to refuse returning to the same wounds. What many do not see is that she still feels deeply. She still desires love, connection, warmth, to be held and chosen. But she refuses to lose herself in the process again. She has already spent too long trying to fit into spaces too small for who she has become. Now she only steps into connections where she can remain whole. That level of awareness goes far beyond romance. It is emotional maturity. It is consciousness. It is the result of facing one's own shadow and still choosing love without self-abandonment. She is not searching for fantasy. She is searching for alignment, a connection where no one dominates, no one disappears, where both individuals can grow without shrinking each other. And if that is too much for some, she no longer tries to convince them otherwise. She would rather remain alone than survive on emotional fragments. To many, that may look like pride, but in truth, it is self-respect in its most refined form. What we are witnessing is a new archetype of woman emerging, one who has turned away from surface-level validation and moved toward depth, meaning, and inner truth. A woman who was once defined by being desired has chosen instead to be respected.